And it's a story wrapped around sports, but with some strategies for you. Can you all hear me okay? I have a really big mouth. I talk with my hands and I can't stand still, right? You can diagnose me as we go through this with whatever you think it is that I've got. But I do have an overabundance of energy, and I've got a story that I want to share with you, and it's called Finding Your Frequency. And I want to start with this, and that is something that I believe to my core. 30 years in professional sports has taught me that this is true. Now, it's not extreme, right? I mean, if I play basketball against Michael Jordan, with all respect to those of you in the younger sect here, he is the greatest basketball player of all time. It's not LeBron James. LeBron James is on the list. I wouldn't beat him, ever, okay? That's extreme talent. But I went to college at the University of Kansas with a young man named Trey, whose father's name was Gary, who was a famous sportscaster. My dad was a salesman, right? I had no history in broadcasting. This guy was both good looking and had a better voice than me. And yet, he's long out of the business and never really made it into the business because his talent couldn't overcome my tenacity. And I really, truly believe that. Okay. That was an audio for you of a radio tuning. This is the second time I've given this presentation. So if it seems a little bit ragged around the edges, like that slide not working, or a typo, please excuse it. Finding your frequency is about dialing it in. Some of you are probably too young to recall a dial-in radio, tuning in your car. In the IPO, right? In the Internet Protocol Operation System, there is no such thing as AM or FM. But I see some people in here who recall going through the static to get where you wanted to be on the radio dial. And I use 104.5 FM because that was WOKB and the Jaguars flagship station for 20 years. And if you got to 104.3, you could almost make out what was happening. And if you went too far with the 104.7, again, you weren't dialed in. But if you got to 104.5, it was crystal clear what you were listening to. And that's my message today about finding your frequency. Your frequency, your individual frequency is your vision for where you're at. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I started here. Anybody ever seen 8-man high school football? Know the rules? Neither did I. I went from the University of Kansas to a little town called Chanute in 1991. And this was one of the first games that I ever called in a rural area where they don't have enough boys. They play on a 40 by 80-yard field. I went on Tuesday and I sold the commercials, 3 live reads for $20. That night I climbed a water tower that was next to the town park. They didn't have a stadium in the high school. And I hung my antenna and I wrapped it around the base of the water tower because if I didn't, the prairie wind would blow it out. And I stood in a box about this size, and I was the play-by-play guy, I was the analyst, and I read my own commercials live. It was me for 3 hours talking about 8-man high school football. And a couple of years later, I ended up in front of Mr. Weaver, the original owner of the Jaguars. And he said, "You got tape?" And I didn't think they were going to give a 25-year-old a chance at an NFL job. It was my dream shot. And yet, he took that tape, and that night, I had no idea that that tape would be meaningful to me at all, except it was one of the first broadcasts I had after graduating, so it was one of my first professional endeavors. And you know what happened? He gave me the job of my dreams. He allowed me to fulfill what I thought was my vision for my life at age 25. And over the first 20 years, I covered preseason games, I covered games in the regular season, I covered AFC Championship games and Super Bowls. I found myself in Europe calling games. It was an amazing career being out in front of the Jacksonville Jaguars as one of their original employees in a city that I loved that had become a bright, shining city on a hill to me. And I was living my dream. And what happened? Well, at age 25, I got the job. At age 45, they made a change. New ownership came in, and they went to a new station. And the deal with the new station was they were going to do it their way, and one of their key guys was going to take the job that I had put at the center of my life. And it was at that point, 20 years in, that I realized my vision was too small. Right? You can forgive me for thinking that I had reached it. I'm living in Atlantic Beach, Florida. I'm from Kansas. Can you imagine what that is like? I'm married to a beautiful woman. I have 3 sons and an NFL job. My vision shrank. And I wasn't even thinking about anything else. So when they made that change, you can imagine, it was a crushing blow to my ego. It was utterly inglorious defeat. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And for the next 10 years, I made mistake after mistake after mistake because I let my feelings drive my actions that created my results. Feelings of being hurt, of envy, of humiliation, of ego, of anger at times. Even though the Jaguars are really good to me, they found a great role for me to stay around, to work in digital, to do preseason games. Because my vision was so very small, I wasn't ready to let go. So at 25, I get the job. At 45, I lose the job. And at 55, where I stand in front of you right now, I have to reinvent myself. I have to create a new vision. I have to find a new frequency as life is changing and my kids are gone and I can't hide behind excuses anymore about my wife's career and about being the scoutmaster and the football coach. Now I have to figure out what I'm going to do. So last fall, I'm in London with the Jaguars for 2 weeks, and I met a sports psychologist, and we sat down and we started talking. And 3 days later, he gave me a formula. He said, you've got to focus. You've got to find your frequency, and then you've got to go to work. And if you do, you'll have a vision that you can work with. So what I'm going to share with you over the next 30 minutes are 4 pillars that I have used to build this new vision based on 30 years in professional football, all of which I think you can apply as you, whether you're young and a student and just getting started, Abraham, or whether you might be like me, in your mid-50s thinking, who am I? Who do I want to be? And what am I willing to do to get there? Because the more that I get out and share this message with people, the more I realize that it doesn't matter who you are, who you want to be, or what you're willing to do to get there, it's going to take some work. And so what this is a presentation about finding your best you, the best version of who you want to be, whether that's as a business owner, whether that's within the framework of a company, whether that's an entrepreneur, whatever it is that works for you. So I sat down and I came up with this thought. What would it take for me to be 1% happier tomorrow than I am right now? And I started writing. And I came up with this. And if you don't have a mission statement for yourself, I highly recommend it. It really is an introspective way for you to figure out the answer to those 3 questions. Who am I? Who do I want to be? What am I willing to do to get there? And you can all read it. But there's that word service that, Blake, you were talking about. And that's the heart of who I think many of us are. Probably most of us are. Whether we're in banking, whether we're in the legal profession, whatever it is that we do it because we love and we serve. So I took this mission statement and I crafted a vision, and I won't bore you with all the details, but I started writing what would a good Monday look like. Not typing, not talking to text, investing my right hand and a pen into paper, which is a very cathartic process. And I came up with a 7-page document that outlined every single day, Monday through Sunday, every month of the year, where I wanted to be, whether it was what I wanted to be speaking in front of a large group or playing tennis in California with my wife after a speaking engagement. I went into incredible detail by being so very focused, and I'm going to share a couple of thoughts with you on that. I met a gentleman a few weeks ago named Michael Getka. You've never heard of him, but he is a very important person in the United States military. Michael was the Navy SEAL Instructor of the Year, year after year after year. He trained the best of the best. And I asked him about this question about focus. I said, Michael, I've seen it from an athlete's perspective. Tell me about from SEAL's perspective. He said, Brian, you remember the mission where they went Osama bin Laden. In May of 2012, I said, I do. He said, do you know that they took 2 helicopters and one of them crashed? I said, I didn't realize that. He said, one of them crashed and the other kept going. Can you imagine being a squad member on one of those helicopters? Being a pilot, because you just lost a fellow squadron member. They had every reason in the world to think about turning around, scrub the mission, major catastrophe. They didn't. They kept going. They hit the ground. They were focused on their mission. That is elite focus, and you can see it in the faces of those SEAL candidates right there. Statistically, 1 out of 5 will make it to the end of BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition School. It's an incredibly grueling experience, according to Michael. I don't know which one of the 5 makes it, but I'm guessing the one up here, who seems so very focused. Can you think of an example of elite focus like that that's played out in front of all of us in the sports world, maybe in the last 2 months? How about that? Right? The Kansas City Chiefs, one of the great teams in the NFL in recent years, weren't that great last year. At one point after November, which is when good teams, start to separate themselves, they lost 5 of 6 games. Their receivers weren't very good. Their defense was really one player, and everybody was downplaying them. Meanwhile, on top of them is Taylor Swift, the most popular, maybe the wealthiest woman in the world, a one-man economy, one-woman economy, right? Everywhere she went, she created hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact, and that should have been enough to distract the Chiefs, but it didn't. They got to the Super Bowl. They got to overtime. And Taylor Swift is in the box, and the television cameras were all over her. All over her, to the point that my sons were like, please, can we watch the football game? Right? Could have been a huge distraction. 7 minutes and 39 seconds left to play in overtime. They're trailing the Niners by 3, and Pat Mahomes goes 8 for 8. All the pressure, the biggest game of the season, his legacy, to be one of just 5 quarterbacks to win back-to-back Super Bowls, and he completes every pass, including with 3 seconds left, getting his team lined up and ready to go, and throws the touchdown to Mecole Hardman, and the Chiefs win their 3rd Super Bowl. It was incredible. And with that looming over the top of it, I'm here to tell you, I've never met a football coach in 30 years who would willingly accept that, who wouldn't say, hey, Travis, either stay or go, right? We can't have this. But Andy Reid knew that he had a team that was capable of elite focus, and he allowed that to happen. And man, what a celebration they had in Kansas City. We live in a world where we are distracted at all times. Do you realize that in 2.5 million years of human history, roughly 100,000 generations, we had no digital media? None. Really, if you think about digital media, it came to be in January 2007, when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, and the distractions started coming. Depending on who you are or what you do, you spend between 7 and 9 hours a day with digital media. 3.5 of those are in social media. 90 minutes, sorry, Abraham, alone is on TV. Think about what you could do with just 90 minutes back. The exercise program you could have, the healthy meals you could cook with your family, the time you could spend reading, the time that you could apply to yourself. What it all adds up to is that we are making ourselves ADHD, and the science is starting to show it, because these phones are constantly on. No, they're just the most guilty, because they're easily accessible and they take our attention away. But we have become a distracted group. And here's why. Talk about focus, and you want to be focused, but you have to learn to have a little bit of unfocused time in order to be your best. What happens in the unfocused time? You know? It's real simple. When you turn your brain off for just a few minutes, the creativity starts to come back. The imagination starts to come back. Your brain starts to regenerate itself and to relax, so that when you come back to focus time, you're able to succeed. Because think about it this way, right? I just showed you that focus is a superpower. It's a super differentiator in a very competitive world. Your ability to do what most people can't, to turn everything off and focus on a task, on a project, on a person, on whatever it is that you've got to do. But you've got to let it go so that your creativity comes back. Boredom is an incredible motivator, but we've forgotten what it's like to be bored. My brothers and I, when we moved around as kids, didn't always have that many friends. We wanted to play football. There weren't enough. So we invented a game where we would stand and throw the football up into the air, kind of like a basketball game starts. And whoever caught it better be fast, because the other two were going to try to tackle you on the way to the driveway, right? It was a great game. We had amazing times with it. Simple. And it came out of sheer boredom. And I use that example because the greatest opportunities that are in front of us come from the creative, imaginative side of our brain. And if we don't start being a little less focused on our digital devices, we're never going to get there. Our brains are overworked, and that's already being linked to depression and other things that don't allow us to be our best. So, I want to give you a tool. By the way, real quick. We're creating an ADHD world where we're giving ourselves distraction. And it reminded me of a story when I first started in radio in 1991. I worked at a little station in Chanute, Kansas, and the owner took me to the circus, which would come through town on a train in Kansas. They still did that 30 years ago. And we started walking through a field because he was going to sell an advertising schedule to the general manager of the circus. And I don't know whether you know much about elephants, but they're not the nicest creatures, right? They're a bit temperamental, maybe with good reason, but they're a bit temperamental. So as we're walking through the field, and little Dale McCoy's about 5'2", and he's charging forward, and I'm looking down and I'm thinking, what the world? He goes, well, they got a rope around their hoof. And I was the only one that noticed it wasn't staked to anything. So we get over to the general manager. I said, before we start, I got to ask him, why don't you have those ropes staked? He goes, listen, we put the rope on them when they're young elephants. By the time they get to this age, they know the rope goes on. They don't go anywhere. They condition themselves to stay in one place because the rope tells them, don't move. Stay here. That's what we've done with digital devices. We have limited our focus, we have made ourselves attention deficit, and we have taken away a powerful tool that we should all be able to use as we look towards our vision, find our frequency. Tom Coughlin had the concentration line, literally painted the doorway teal in 1995 for the first season of Jaguars football. He didn't have to contend with digital media back then. But he knew that he needed his players to know when they crossed that line, they were his. They were all about performance, and that line was all it took to get them there. We have to have our own concentration line to function in a way that you want it to. But you have to work at it. And trust me, the focus is worth the fight. In 6 minutes, you may have to put a hoodie on, right? So that you can actually take away your peripheral vision and all the distractions. It may be a song or a candle or the right place where you work, but to put yourself and your brain focused in that area. I use this extensively when it's time to write or prepare for a game. And when I learned about it, by the way, you know what Pomodoro means? It's tomato in Italian. You know why it's called the Pomodoro technique? Because the gentleman who used it had a kitchen timer that was shaped like a tomato. It's brilliant, and it works. And if you do it once a day, you can get an amazing amount of work done. If you do it twice a day, you're hitting the magic number that Richard Branson, the great entrepreneur, Sir Richard Branson, of all the Virgin brands believes, is that everybody has between 2 and 3 hours a day of intense work ability. And he asks his key executives, just give me those 2 to 3 hours a day. I don't care if you do it at 6 in the morning or 10 at night. Give me those hours. We need to reclaim those hours for ourselves. Somebody is making money off of your attention. It's called attention harvesting. It could be Apple or Facebook or in YouTube, Instagram, you choose. But if you can reclaim your focus, you will profit from it, and your vision and your frequency will be dialed in as well. Pillar number 2, preparation. What's the most important day in the NFL? Well, Sunday, of course, right? Because that's when the games are played. But Tuesday is an incredibly important day because it's the players' day off. Hold on to that thought. An NFL week is a college-level course in the opponent. The Steelers one week, the Chiefs the next, the Raiders the week after that. And the exam is on Sunday. So you have got to get to a point where you thoroughly understand every facet of that team. Because on Sunday, you better know how to execute. Hop to gun, king trips, right tear, 52 sway, all go special, X shallow, cross H wide. Can anybody interpret that? It's really not that hard. When I explain it, you'll get it. Right? So hop is right here. Is this a pointer? Maybe not. Is H. That's the running back. And it tells the running back you're going to go in motion to the strong side, which is where those three receivers are. Gun, king, trips, right is the formation. Trips right are the three receivers all to the same side. Are you going to show me what pointers you got them? You. To the top up. Okay. So here's the three receivers, right? That's trips right. King tells this back that he's going to be a receiver. Tear 52 sway. Sway tells this back here, right, that he does not have any blocking responsibility whatsoever. And tear 52 is the blocking scheme for the offensive line, and it's indicating that they're expecting a blitz through one of the A gaps by the middle linebacker. Sway tells this running back again, right, he is going to be a primary option. All go means everybody's going. There's no running play here. It's a pass 100%. Special means that this F receiver right here has to split the safeties in the middle of the field, put pressure on them. Make them decide one way or another, make it easy for the quarterback to make the read. X, shallow cross. This is probably a second down and 6 play, and you're trying to get your big receiver across the middle matched up with a linebacker. H wide here tells this guy that he's the secondary option. So, look, what does all that mean? It means you've got to know about 60 of those on Sunday, and not just those. You've got to know when you get to the ball lined up. You've got to know that if the safety's in the middle of the field, the play changes. You've got to know if they're in the nickel, the play changes. The crowd noise is going, the clock is running down. You've got to be thoroughly prepared for everything. It's not rocket surgery, folks, but it is a college-level course in your opponent. And it's called the Not For Long League. Because if you can't work in the classroom where players spend most of their time, you're going to have a hard time under pressure in a stadium with the TV cameras on, being able to execute. So it's about 60 plays like this. And every week it changes. I'll put this right here. Oops. So there's a quick look. And there's the typo that I mentioned, at what a coach's schedule looks like. It starts at 6 a.m. and it works all day. The one place I would never go on a Tuesday, risking the wrath of Tom Coughlin, Hall of Fame coach, was the coach's offices. Nothing could distract me. Not even someone walking through, and they were all looking for it. You could see that there are endless amounts of meetings, preparation, time in front of the tape. If it ended at 11 o'clock and you went home, you won. Most of the time, coaches spend the night in their office. Here's what a player's day looks like. This is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It says the weight room opens, which kind of suggests that it's up to you if you want to come in. You, if you're in the not-for-long league, you come in. These guys know that they have to give the most time on task they possibly can if they're going to be ready. And that repeats over and over and over. And most of them take iPads home every night for the game plan and more video study, because they can't afford not to be ready on the practice field the next day. They're so limited by the number of reps. Let me just put it in perspective, because when you think about the NFL, you think about millionaires. 65% of the players make $1 million or less a year. The average career is 3.5 years long, which means that most players are on the verge of losing their job every single Monday. There is always someone younger, someone cheaper they're looking to replace you with. It's the nature of the game. So the preparation is essential for these guys to be their best. And guys who are prepared are not anxious. Guys who are not anxious can perform. And that's what these guys are looking for. A good friend of mine who now works in the league office gave me this. And I just saw it a couple of weeks ago, but I believe I've known it for my 30 years in the NFL. He says, if you're humble, and you should be, whether you're the first pick in the draft or you're Mr. Irrelevant, which is the tag given to the last player chosen. If you're humble, you will be hungry. And if you're humble and hungry and willing to outwork everybody, you'll stay in this game, and your vision for your career will thrive. But if you are missing any one of those, your career is going to be on the shorter side. So you better be humble. Again, no matter whether you're Trevor Lawrence, star quarterback, right? Or Bob Smith, the last guy picked in the 7th round. Humble and hungry. And by the way, that hunger has to come from within. Because when you have money in your pocket, guess what? You're not quite as desperate. And football is a game of desperation. We need desperate men on football fields to be entertained. Guys, when they have big bank accounts, tend to think, my hamstring this week, I don't know, go, coach. I got this shoulder thing here. You got to be humble. And that outwork everything, you guys know this. You do it every day. You're entrepreneurs and small business owners. You understand that side of it. The one thing that I can say is that it never feels as if you've arrived when you get to kickoff. There's always something else that needs to be done. And I'll give you a quick story. Tom Coughlin, when he was the Jaguars head coach on Friday nights, he and Judy, his late wife, would take a couple to dinner. It was their way of staying connected, of feeling human, because he was never home, and Judy wanted it. So one week in 2000, Jennifer and I, my wife, were the dinner guests. And Tom said to me that morning at 5:30 when we finished taping his television show, he said, don't forget, it's a late dinner tonight. I said, what do you mean, coach? He said, it's a 9 o'clock dinner. I said, 9 o'clock? Why? He said, we're playing the Seahawks. And he got up and he walked out of the studio. I didn't know what that meant. So I had to go and find out. Hey, what is he talking about? We're playing the Seahawks. That's why we have a 9 o'clock dinner. He said, well, Tom knows that Dennis Erickson, who's the coach of the Seahawks that year, doesn't leave the office until 5. And she turned and she walked away. The rest of the day I was trying to figure it out. Well, Tom wouldn't leave the office until he knew that the coach he was playing was likely out of his office. And he wouldn't waste time. So dinner was at 9. And Tom knew the chef of the Augustine room, so it worked out. But it's that willingness. He didn't waste the hours. He didn't have social media. He wasn't scrolling, doom scrolling. He was working on 3rd down and 4, on a 2-point conversion, or an onside kick. Brings me to coaching and a 4th and 1 mentality. I mentioned Tom. Look, great coaches are great leaders. And great leaders don't create great followers. Great leaders create leaders. Tom made that abundantly clear. He was looking to create a culture of leadership and accountability. And I know it when I see it. And we haven't seen it in Jacksonville since Tom was the coach. The record kind of says that. Great leaders don't create great followers. They create leaders. The first time I met Tom, I was a 25-year-old kid, fresh out of 8-man high school football, and I was scared to death. And he wasn't in his office, and his secretary, Joanna, sat me down, and I started to try to read everything I could upside down. Right? I was trying to master this. Great journalist, by the way. Figure out how to read things upside down and backwards to get a story. So here's the story I have. Excellence can be attained if you risk more than others think is safe. You love more than others think is wise. You dream more than others think is practical. And you expect more than anyone believes is possible. And that was the culture that Tom Coughlin created. And I had a preview of it. Great leaders create a culture that exists when they're not around. Are you all familiar with rucking? Go ruck? Okay. Rucking is what Green Berets do. What Army soldiers do in their training. They put all their food, meals they go off into the woods, and they carry heavy weight, and keep on moving. A gentleman named Jason McCarthy founded the company Go Ruck after his career. I heard him on Peter Attia's podcast. Our guy's a Bulls grad who lives in Atlantic Beach. Who knew? And Peter Attia said to him, hey, what do those MREs taste like, right? They come in a can. They last for years. He said, I don't know. He said, I thought you were carrying a week's worth on your back. It was the only thing you had to eat. He goes, I don't know, because hunger is the best sauce. You can focus, you can prepare, you can find a coach, but without commitment, without being willing to sell out, not your values, not your morals, not your beliefs, but without the ability to sell out other people's opinion of you. You're doom scrolling on social media. We all do it. I love golden retriever videos. I can't stop. That's why my phone is generally off. Without that, without the commitment and the ability to get there, dialing in your frequency is a very difficult thing for you to be able to do. So I want to tell you a quick story. And I'll end it. In that 2022 season that I mentioned, Jaguars had that dramatic win against the Titans to win the division. The next week they hosted a playoff game, and we were all excited. Back in the playoffs for the first time in years. And we had a night crowd, Chargers in. Trevor Lawrence came out for an interception, and the Chargers scored. And then he threw another one, and they scored again. And then he threw another one, they scored again. Before we knew it, we're down 27-0. It's not even halftime yet. You're like, oh my God. Could this go any worse? The Jaguars have won 6 straight games. We're feeling invincible. And all of a sudden, you look like the same old Jaguars. Even though the narrative had turned, the visual was the same. So they got a timeout with about 2 minutes left. And Doug Peterson said to Trevor, and you know Trevor's heart's just got to be racing. It's his first playoff game. And the hopes of a whole city are on his shoulders. Doug said, calm down. Let's get one for the half. So they got one. Beautiful little rifle right into the end zone. You probably saw that video when pulled it in. 27-7. My wife came and found me at halftime. She goes, that's great. I said, what are you talking about? That's great. How's that going to happen, Jen? You think they're going to come back? The Chargers are going to run the ball the entire second half. There's not enough time. She goes, I believe they can do it. I didn't. They did. The first 3 drives of the second half, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. For whatever reason, the Chargers coach, I could have gone over to his sideline one game. What was he thinking? 2 minutes left. The Jaguars are trailing. And because the Chargers back moving, they start off down the field, and Trevor Lawrence is moving right. Riley Patterson, the kicker's on the sideline. Now, a kicker is sort of the outcast, right? I mean, you only need it when you need it. They don't practice with the rest of the team. They're kind of outcasts because they're not that tall, and football players are big. It just doesn't seem like they're a big part of the team. And yet, Riley Patterson is over there. He's focused. He's prepared. He's taking the coaching. And Trevor gets the ball 4th down at 42 yards. And if you're Riley Patterson, please, God, let me make this fuel. And the coach goes, I'm going to go for it. And if you're Riley Patterson, now you're in fight or flight mode. What am I doing? Why are you don't believe in me? You don't trust me. Coach wanted to get closer. So they ran a beautiful play. Travis Etienne took it up the Jags sideline for 25 yards. Now it's a 36-yard field goal. And Riley Patterson's moment is right there. The game was about Trevor Lawrence. The game wasn't about Riley. In corporate terms, Riley was the guy in the mailroom. The smallest of jobs. The least important player, if you will. And yet here was his moment. It was the thing he had worked for his whole career. He always wanted to win a game for his team. And if you're a competitor, it better be a playoff game. A game that means something. He made it through being cut and released and resigned and routines. And here he was with his moment. And he trots out onto the field, and he gets ready to deliver on his moment. And everyone 70,000 people in the stadium, people all around the country, because the only football game on that night, are watching. And the Chargers call timeout. So he has time to think about it. Finally, he gets the line up. The ball is placed. He puts his right foot through it, and it goes up, and it starts to veer to the right. I'm standing on the sidelines, and I'm going, oh my. After all this comeback, the ball was going to miss. Poor Ryan. At the last minute, a gust of wind, the breath of God, drops the ball through the elbow, and the Jaguars win the game. And Riley Eisner, again, the kicker, a guy that you don't focus on, a team member, the mail-room guy. I hope there's no mail-room guys. Did his part, because I truly believe in order to be a good teammate, you have to be a great individual. You have to be above and beyond. Dial in on your frequency, who you are, what you want to be, a game-winning kicker, and what you're willing to do. You cut, find a new job, move across the country, you cut there, go back to another city, and figure it all out, over and over and over. The difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do. You know that. I've learned that. What you do. Find your frequency first. Dial in that focus. Challenge yourself to reclaim it from the digital devices. Your preparation will increase exponentially without you doing much. Find a great mentor, a great coach who can help you with that vision. And then sell out because it's worth it. The feeling of being free. I'm starting a new act in life at age 55. This is the second time I've done this. I feel more free than I have in 30 years. That vision statement unleashed in me a desire to go and do something. So I want to ask you this one thing. Please write down my email. It's Brian@BrianSexton.com. If there's something that you took away from this presentation that you think could be better, if there's a mild constructive critique you could offer to help me as I take this forward and eventually take it to market, I'd be welcome. I'll take the great stuff too. But if you could offer any critique of it at all, that would be considered a great thing. Thank you for having me out there. Hope you'll find it.
Okay, now I have to be inspiring after that. That's not